Wanakam, and thank you very much for the opportunity as well. It's a real delight to be able to reach so many people in this way. I think what I'll start with is just by giving sort of an overview of the electorate of Greenway. It's an area that's very diverse, and it has changed fundamentally over the last decade, and even more over the past 20 years or so. It's an area that is very diverse in terms of socioeconomic advantage and disadvantage as well. There's some pockets of areas where people have quite challenged lives, but equally there are areas that used to be farmland that are now opened up to new development, and older areas where development is being consolidated, and that each of those presents its own challenges for all levels of government. So in terms of the geography, the electorate of Greenway runs from Bandon Road in Vineyard to the north, basically follows Old Windsor Road and the railway line all the way down to the Great Western Highway. So it includes suburbs such as Toongabbie, Girraween, parts of Pendle Hill, Seven Hills, Blacktown, Glenwood, Stanhope Gardens, Kellyville Ridge, right up to what I call the New Riverston and the New Schofields, that is all being developed, in new suburbs like Tallawong as well. So a really growing community. And I think the second point I'd like to make there is I think that reflects the need for governments, again, at all levels, to be planning for the future, to ensure that we meet people's expectations of quality of life for them and their families. And it being an electorate that has a large number of people who were born overseas or speak a language at home other than English, I think everyone has the same aspiration that their children and their families have better opportunities than they had themselves. So I think it is a very aspirational community that really ties all that together. In terms of myself, I mean, I was born in Blacktown Hospital, grew up in Seven Hills, went to school in Layla Park, got my first job in a supermarket in Blacktown when I was 15, and I served on Blacktown Council as a councillor and deputy mayor for some time as well. But I did have a life in the private sector. I was a lawyer at a corporate law firm in the city for 10 years. So I feel that I've brought some experience from that. Also, you know, having been married for 24 years now, raising two daughters with my husband, Michael, who's a partner in a national law firm, I think that gives us a unique perspective on all of these issues of quality of life. And you know, his story, if I can sort of end on this point, I think my husband's story is one that sort of exemplifies what Greenway is about. You know, my husband's first generation from Lebanese parents. He couldn't speak English when he started school, but thanks to the care of teachers, went on to go to Sydney University, do really well in double degrees in law and economics, and is now the partner of a national law firm. So I think that it just demonstrates that people, when they're given the opportunity to succeed, they will. And I think that that speaks volumes to our great, strong and ever-growing Tamil community as well. Sure. Well, I mean, I'd like to focus on some of the local policies that we have. And again, this goes towards quality of life. It's about coming out of the pandemic, doing things, learning the lessons and doing things smarter and better. And, you know, in this part of Sydney, we were subject to the harshest lockdowns. And what came out of that was that we have people who, particularly in some of those newer areas, when there was a 5 kilometre movement limitation, people really didn't have enough open space. They didn't have playgrounds for their kids. So it really demonstrated that we needed to do things better at a local level. So we've been going out listening to the community and getting feedback. And one of the key things that they've come back with is the importance of having wellness facilities, wellness for their kids. So good playgrounds, new playgrounds where there are none, better playgrounds where there's older equipment, better equipment at those playgrounds, off-leash dog parks, some new fun things for kids as well, things like a water play park, but walking areas as well that are really conducive to people utilising those for wellness. So it's a real, I think, a focus on infrastructure that goes to wellness and quality of life. And these things typically, as you know, get delivered by local governments, but they get delivered faster, and they get delivered with a broader range of community input, I think, when you have different levels of government cooperating with each other. So that's really been our focus there. The other one, of course, and this is important to everyone, is health infrastructure. We only have one public hospital in the area that's expected to cater for an ever-growing population that's increasing in the multiple hundreds of percents over the next 20 years. The suburb of Riverstone alone is scheduled to boom in the next 20 years and become essentially a city within itself. So we need to start planning now for that future. The New South Wales state government has proposed a new hospital at Rouse Hill, a public hospital, but initially that was proposed to be without an emergency department. So we got together and started a community campaign urging this hospital be constructed with an emergency department. I'm very pleased that recently we were able to get that commitment out of the New South Wales government, and that wouldn't have happened if not for the community getting on board with that. And the third, I think, that goes to, again, one of the big lessons of the pandemic was the importance of quality communications, not just broadband, but also mobile services. Yeah, people working from home, studying from home, expecting to do a lot of dealings from home. And unfortunately, in some of these areas, the quality of communications is substandard. In the northern part of the electorate in particular, as you have more people move in and utilising mobile networks, it really does degrade the quality of those networks. And I've had people tell me on countless occasions, I live only, a couple of kilometres away from the Sydney CBD essentially, and I can't get a decent mobile signal in my own home. So again, we've been lobbying very heavily with the community to get a new mobile tower built around the ponds that will assist that area and surrounds as well. And very pleased that we finally got the New South Wales Minister for Local Government to sign off on getting that new tower put in at Jonas Bradley Reserve in the ponds. So I think all of these issues go to quality of life, and that's before we even get to TAFE and the importance of education and training and ensuring that we have a skilled workforce that is also going to meet the needs of a growing service economy. Greenway has an enormous number of people who work in the health services field, and be that services in terms of childcare, aged care, direct health services, but we're going to need a lot more as well. So ensuring that people have that access through the TAFE policy that we've announced and improvements to our universities and schools is really important as well. So I think the three words, quality of life, really do sum up the initiatives in that respect. Sure, and I must compliment, when we talk about a single community, it's difficult to describe it as a homogenous one. But I can, from my observations and my dealings over, 1.5 decades with the great Tamil community here in Greenway, give some observations. I think the first is that the ability of people of Tamil background to integrate into our society has really been exemplary. I see entrepreneurs, people who are leaders in business, in public service, academia, people who've done really well. And again, I think that reflects, it doesn't matter where you've come from. People want the best for their kids and for their families. They want them to do well at school because everyone appreciates that education is the great enabler. So I've observed, and I've really had the privilege of forming some very close friendships with people who are of Tamil background. And the one thing they always emphasise to me is the importance of doing stuff for their kids and their families, taking care of their seniors. And I was really privileged to visit the Tamil Seniors Group yesterday as well. And I'm always in awe of these people who are getting on in life, but they still manage to get together. They enjoy one another's company, and they're very welcoming. So that was great to be able to do that after a long time as well, because the pandemic has disrupted a lot of that. But again, I see the entrepreneurial aspects of people of Tamil background coming out in everything, as I said, from small businesses, and not just one or two small businesses. I know so many people who've got a variety of businesses, and they really succeed in all of those areas. But education, I see, is a really big one. And the challenges, especially around some areas that have high concentration of Tamil populations, Girraween, Pendle Hill, Toongabbie, for example. These are areas that have fundamentally changed over the last couple of years with increasing densification of housing. That puts pressure on schools. Probably the biggest bit of feedback I get from these communities is the lack of open space for their kids to play in at some of these schools, the large number of demountables. Some of that does get dealt with, but I think the lesson here is we need to start planning now. Those populations aren't going to go backwards. They're only going to increase exponentially. So that creates big pressures on our infrastructure, be it our roads, our public transport systems. But again, if people don't have the best education, then they're really not getting the best start. So I think that's really where we need to focus. I also just observe the ability for various Tamil groups to ensure that culture, language, and institutions are kept alive. Everything from, there's an upcoming Tamil festival that I'm attending that gets bigger every year. There's Tamil language groups, Tamil dance groups, a lot of which, again, are based in these schools because this is where people predominantly gather. And it's a real credit to see that these are being driven by volunteers and they keep growing. They keep growing in popularity. People wanting to ensure that not only culture, language survives, but is also spread out to wider audience as well. And the pride that I see, I visited a school recently. When I say recent, I mean just sort of pre-pandemic. But it's one of those schools where some of these Tamil language institutions are based, and they really want people to understand the Tamil culture. It's a really open culture. It's one that, I don't need to tell your viewers, one in which beauty is expressed through many different forms. And it's always a delight to see them shared with our local area. I guess the last thing I'll mention there that I think ties in well to the multicultural aspect, but also the need to have the content of different communities represented on our screens, is we've proposed a really good policy for looking at relocating SBS from its current location in Artarmon to Western Sydney. And rather than that just moving a studio, that's about moving content creation, having spaces that are able to be utilised. And when we talk about different platforms that people can access their news on, I think at the same time we need to remember that this is a really important public asset. Along with the ABC, these are our public broadcasters, and we want people from Western Sydney, which is the heart of multicultural Australia, to have the best access to that. And I think that can only be a good thing for jobs, but also for dispersing the Tamil language and culture as well. We're moving, of course, into the pointy end of an election cycle, and what's been probably the most disruptive period in most people's lives, certainly in my life. But I think people are coming out of that wanting a plan for the future, wanting a strategy. And they're looking for governments that cooperate together, not looking to divide, but governments that are thinking about the future and what sort of offering there can be. And I think there's some consistent themes there. It's about intense manufacturing and smart manufacturing, bringing it to Western Sydney. I think it's about addressing some of those real quality of life issues, not only in terms of the infrastructure that I mentioned, but also cost of living. Greenway is one of the areas of the highest rental and mortgage stress. And people are really under a lot of strain. We're a commuter society as well, be it utilising public transport or the road system. The tolls that go up all the time really do take are a real expense on people. Not to mention the price of even petrol as well. So, people are really struggling at the moment. I think everyone's doing what they need to do to make ends meet. but we're not going to go back to life as it was in normal times anymore. We're still going to be doing things differently. And in many ways, I think that's a really positive thing. But we need governments that respond to that, that recognise we're going to need the best communications for people in their homes, in their businesses. People are going to need the best infrastructure, the best leisure options, and also the best education for their children into the future. No, I look forward to that. And Andrew, and thank you very much. I mean, I've been so fortunate over the last 12 years as the Member of Parliament for this area to make so many friends of Tamil background. And only next Monday, I'm going to be commemorating with a special Tamil community service for Anzac Day as well, which I always really look forward to. And I think that it demonstrates the great patriotism of our many and varied Tamil community.